Oh, thank you, Linda. Hey, hi, Linda. And Tyler. Bye, Tyler. Don't get spoilers. This is a good story, so don't get spoilers. Um, I wondered about doing a book club on one of my books, like do reading it together and then discussing it once a week or something like that for fun. But part of the problem is these books are so stinking long. And the other part is, there's other stuff to do and other books to read. So one of these days, maybe I'll do a shorter one that we just get to do like a book club anyway, that's just an idea. So, if you don't want spoilers for his Stolen Luna, get out now. This is your final warning. But do come back in 45 minutes if you want to talk about Demon Slayer, because, well, it'll be about 40 minutes now, because we are going to do that at the end. So, for those of you who are here. Why are you worried about your hair? Because last time I did this, literally on Facebook, I had this like one piece that like pulled forward by itself, and every time, like I had to go back into the video because somebody had asked me a question. I need to go back and remember what I had said, and I was like, "What is going on with my hair?" Anyway, I found it very distracting, and I don't want to do that to people where you want to listen to something, but your eyes are like, what is going on? So just warn me if something goes funky. Okay. For those of you who are here for His Stolen Luna, this is the one that completed the most recently. It just finished about 10 days ago, 10 or 12 days ago. And it's yet another one that I wish I'd been able to do more with. But anyway, if you haven't read it, but you're deciding to stay anyway, the basic premise is you've got a guy who is a powerful leader, but kind of mysterious and not really. He's in the modern world. He's a werewolf, or rather a wolf, because Lycan, I think, is the appropriate mythological term. He can shift into a wolf whenever he pleases. He's a powerful figure, but there's a lot of gossip, there's a lot of rumor, there's a lot of misunderstanding about who and what he is. He has had a mate before, but she was not a soulmate. She died, and he's been blamed for it. People think that he murdered her. And she, the heroine of our story, is the overprotected. They believe that she's the prophesied bearer of the white wolf. They believe that she is going to give birth to a wolf that will essentially be the savior, the modern day savior of the wolf as a people, because there's a prophecy that there's a demon alpha, there's a wolf who has given their heart over to the dark, and they are working to essentially take over the world as a whole. The wolves keep themselves hidden from the humans, but they interact with them, they look human. Um, and she is somebody that the Pax believe is going to be very key to that whole process. So she holds a lot of attention and a lot of power, but she doesn't have a lot of control or power in and of herself. Her father is extremely controlling, and he's trying to identify who she should mate with. Excuse me. And the story begins where his family, who have watched him grieve and basically pull away from society for 3 years, go out and kidnap her, which is something that happens between the packs now and again, and bring her to him and are like, hey, hey. And it turns out, guess what? They are actually mates. So this one was a little bit different in the setup because you had a male lead who had been in a married slash mated relationship before, but it was a what I would call a forged bond. They chose to create a bond between themselves. It was not a soul bond. They were not created for each other. And so when he lost his mate under circumstances that he felt were his fault, um, he has to now come to terms with that and has been retreating from life. At the beginning of the story, he's basically kept out of the limelight. There's been a lot of gossip about him. He's a little bit sour, he's a little bit dark. And then she comes into his life, and as you can imagine, that sweetens his life a great deal. So The first question that Janelle gave me, if anybody, oh, cool. Okay. I see your question there, Melissa, and I'm going to try to remember that one. If I don't, post it again in a second. So maybe copy that, and if I ask, post it again. Um, so the interplay between the packs, I think, was probably the biggest source of conflict in this story. But what you had for JP, his full name was John Paul. Everybody calls him JP except Lark. Lark calls him Jay, which, if you're interested, is based on my cousin, whose name is Jason, but his wife calls him Jay. And I've started picking it up just because I hear her do it. I've never called him Jason my whole life, but in the last 10 years or so, she does it all the time, and I started doing it. I don't know why. But anyway, that was where that came from. Did the curse put on Jay ever get lifted, or did he just learn how to fight it? So, part of the reason JP thinks that he is to blame for his first mate's death is because he was fighting a demon that had shown up to, in his mind, attack his family or his pack, and he was proving himself. There were some issues in his previous marriage and his previous mate, and he was essentially proving himself to his mate. And he got a little arrogant in it and a little bit lackadaisical and took too much time to kill this thing, and it ended up cursing, doing a death curse, and killing his mate to make the death curse stick. So he lost his mate, and at the same time believed he came under the effects of a death curse that would mean any mate that he had in future was going to die. So he was like, I'm not going to take another mate. I'm just going to be a lone wolf. Um, and he invested himself in his family and his pack. He has a very large extended family pack. They're very loud and boisterous. My imaginings, or at least it's based sort of loosely, very loosely, on like an Italian family. Lots of laughter, lots of talking, lots of having food together, lots of very open conversation. um, so the thing that I think I never did well in this story, which is where this question is coming from, I never did well in this story showing the difference between what JP believed to be true and what was actually true. So in my mind, JP was never under a curse in the sense that um, it was really his belief in it that made it powerful in his life. Kenji, his uncle, says that to him a couple of times, or at least sort of walks into that conversation with him. I believe there's a lot of truth on a spiritual level to we invite darkness into our lives. And we can do it in a wide variety of ways. And when we are inviting it, it will show up. And so I think for JP, what I was trying to communicate in this story was that the reason he had so much fear, and the reason, at least for the first sort of two-thirds of the story, he was so controlled by his fear early on. Um, it was because he believed it. And that opened a door for him personally that allowed darkness to have a much greater grip on him than it would have had he been more faithful. So on a, like, if you want to call it a world building level, I think I didn't do a great job of showing, and it's hard because you're looking at it from the perspective of the person who has the belief, right? So because he believed that this curse could and would stick, that brought or attracted more of the darkness to him, more of the demons, more of their power. So on the one hand, I suppose you could say he was under a curse because there was definitely power at work there. But the reason that you see a shift at the end of the story without this kind of like catalyst moment is because he started letting go of his fear. He started trusting what was going on around him and who was there to support him. Um, and that empowered him effectively. So it's not that he learned how to fight because he was still kind of in there, right? He's still learning. Like he hadn't yet, at the end of the story, it wasn't like everything was all wrapped up in a tidy bow for him. He was still, dealing with fear for his mate and stuff towards the end. But he'd lost that frantic, kind of desperate, white knuckling fear. And to me, that was the idea, was to show his character come to a place where faith in God, um, love from other people, and love that he gave, those three things together sort of became an armor in his life. Um, but it was very difficult. What I didn't anticipate at the beginning was how difficult it would be to show that from his perspective because he's walking into that. It wasn't, again, the book had to end faster than I intended it to. So there were some conversations and some developments that I didn't get to fully flesh out. And that's part of the problem here. But what I hope you would see if you went back and read it again, what I hope you would see is JP starting to come to terms with the idea that by focusing so much on this darkness, he's actually inviting it into his life. And that's not to say that he shouldn't have been defensive. And he learned how to fight. He's teaching others how to fight. I don't think there's any problem with that. It was more that he needed to um, trust that God wasn't going to bring anything into their life or their pack that was just going to derail him. Do you know what I mean? Like it's that kind of uh, it's a really weird balance to find between using the strength that you have, using the knowledge that you have, but not giving all of your energy to it. There's an aspect of faith and trust that has to come in as well. And what I was trying to do with him was show him sort of moving out of, in just a sense of growth, moving out of fear and into trust, and also having some good people around him. Had I been able to tell the story exactly as I wanted to, you would have spent more time at the gathering. He would have gotten more sort of tangible insight into this process. He would have tried one or two things that were not right and realized it and backed away and come to this kind of moment of giving up. And you do see him a couple different times kind of surrendering, and just, we're just going to go do this. He's just not, he just recognizes that he can't anticipate everything, and he's just got to fight the fight that's in front of him. So we were moving in that direction. So to my mind, the curse was never inevitable. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. There was a curse on his life. Had he understood it better, had he himself been in a better position, it wouldn't have had as much power as it did. And over time, he would have realized actually it had none at all. Or at least that his relationship with God and his desire for love and truth would have combated it without him having to be so sort of, defensive. I love this question. Oh my gosh, this was the best question. Or at least it was for me as the storyteller. Who was the more tortured soul, JP or Adam? Hands down, Adam. But what the reason being, JP has a lot of love in his life, and love does a lot to help people, to heal, and to sort of comfort and to sustain people in pain. The more love there is, more real love, the more real, secure, unconditional love a person has, the stronger they are. I think that's just a factual truth in this world. And it's always part of my goal with a story, with a fiction, to encourage people to be seeking real unconditional love. Because I think that at its purest, you can only get that from God. But people who know him and love him learn how to love unconditionally. And having people in your life who literally will stick with you through anything does so much to. It's a strength that's not like, look at me. It's a strength that comes from trust. And that's what I think our world is missing. We don't have any trust anymore. We don't have trust with each other. We don't have trust with God. We don't have trust with ourselves. And that just undermines everything. Anyway, didn't mean to get too deep. Point is, when you're looking at JP, who was very tortured at the beginning, but tortured in grief and regret, right? He was stuck in guilt and regret because he hadn't started looking at that problem from a perspective of truth. He was still so caught up in his own pain and his own, I wish it would have been regret that he hadn't moved into a healthy perspective of it. But he had the tools around him to get there. Adam, on the other hand, came into this life unaware that the people around him and the structure around him and the belief system around him is so unhealthy and so toxic, and came to understand that as he got older. And what you see with him at the time of the sort of the crux of his story when he's sort of 13, 14, you see him realize how dark the people around him are, and that undermines his belief in everything, including himself. And the difference between Adam and JP when they're in that place, because both of them were in that place of life is dark, right? But JP always had the counter voice. He always had people around him that loved and showed love and showed support. He knew because he got to witness it in his parents, in his family, in his friends, in his pack. He always got to see that love is powerful. Adam had never, except with Lark, had never seen that at work. And so he got to that place that I see a lot of young people hit in their teens, which is when you realize how dark the world is, either something happens to you or happens around you that pulls the rug out from under this idea that we all have when we're young, that it'll never happen to me, or, there's this sort of invincibility thing. When Adam hit that place, what it made him do is it made him question the one person who had shown him that kind of love throughout his life, which then made him distrustful of everything around her. So, of the two of them, Adam is definitely the more tortured, but that's because he had a more toxic environment and a more unhealthy example. And he's young. He's very young. So he then doesn't have the tools to process what's happened to him. But I don't know if any of you have ever watched a young person learn that their hero is really wrong, really dark. It's very undermining for their entire life. They can go super cynical and super jaded and super afraid or super numb and shut down. And Adam was kind of this big mess of the whole thing. So, yes, Adam is the more tortured, but he's also young enough that with the right stuff around him, that doesn't have to stay that way for his whole life. And I saw somebody asked me, are we going to get to see Adam's story? It is my goal to tell Adam's story. Because what happened with this story was the same thing that happened with King of Beasts. I got to a certain place in it and realized I couldn't tell the story in one book, which is exactly what happened with King of Beasts as well. So, yes, it was always the goal to tell Adam's story because that's where you get to see the fulfillment of a lot of the things that we're talking about. But When and how that's going to happen exactly, I'm not 100% sure. Um, did anybody, I want to just check really quick if there's any other questions. I know Melissa had one, and now I can't find it. One second. When JP and Lark get to name a new pack, will Adam's pack become that pack? No. Because, as you saw at the end, Adam has essentially established his own. So, bloodline wise, yeah, you could argue that they are. Definitely, like you could, um, if he wanted to, like if Adam wanted to go, oh, we're part of that, and they were willing to accept that. The way the wolf, the system that I had in my mind for all of these packs, the way it worked, like you saw with Adam, a wolf can essentially convert. I hate to use that word because it's not a religious thing. It's just a alignment thing, right? Any wolf can become part of any pack by choice. So if the alpha of that pack will accept you and you want to be in that pack, it just happens. You go to them, they embrace you, and now the rest of the packs know you're part of that pack. You become part of that mind link, you become part of that bloodline. It's all good. So on that standpoint, yes, Adam has the bloodline to be a part of that pack. But the same thing is true in reverse. Any wolf can reject their pack, become a lone wolf or a rogue, and essentially cut themselves off from their pack and no longer be part of it. And that's what Adam's done. At the end of his Sol and Luna, Adam has cut himself off from the pack. He still has close enough relationships with people in the Baptiste pack that if he wanted to, he could mind link with them because they would accept him as well. That's the other thing with these wolves. If they have a relationship of intimacy with somebody who's not in their pack, another wolf, they can choose to mind link. And Adam would still be able to do that with a lot of the Baptistes because they would accept him. And so there'd be that automatic ability to do that. But he is choosing to cut himself off. So he's choosing to separate, and he's also physically distant from them as well. The last chapters that you see when he's older, he's essentially, without intending to, he has set up his own pack. It's not what his was. People followed him because of what they believed about him, that he did not believe about himself. So they have followed him, and there has become a natural sort of organic pack that's developed out of that over the years. So what you're seeing in those last chapters is him and his closest pack mates who have essentially dedicated their lives to protecting him. And the stuff that's happening around them when they're in their pack place is the development of their own society and their own pack. So, on a black and white level, no, Adam won't be part of the new pack, or wouldn't be. He could choose to be. But what he's actually done is made his own. But it won't be a recognized bloodline. There's only 7 recognized bloodlines, so all the packs that are kind of small or unique are attached usually to one of those. He has gone rogue and is, essentially just a nothing. He's just a wolf out there doing his thing. But of course, their whole world doesn't see him that way because they believe things about him, whether they're right or not. Um, so there's dynamics to be worked out there about what his future will be and what the future with the rest of the pack will be as well. Um, Melissa asked, oh, just going back to the beginning, was Lark's dad trying to sterilize her so she couldn't have the white wolf? I'm trying to figure out how much I can say without ruining Adam's story. Her dad didn't want to sterilize her. He wanted to have control of when and how she reproduced. I'll say that. But that's as much as I'll say. um, Oh, and you were talking about with JP and his quote unquote demons, both real and emotional, and it was similar to how Adam believed. Yes, Adam is truly in a bad place. When you see the end of Lark and JP's story, Adam's really messed up, like really messed up. And when he did the thing that to me was supposed to be the big clue was in the letter to Lark. He says, "The voices in my head don't gel." So what he's saying there is, that whole idea that you get in cartoons of an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. What he's saying there is that he's aware of that in his own thoughts and in his sort of things coming towards him or that he's aware of, influences. He is aware of his own darkness. He's also aware of his own goodness, and he's battling because there are parts of him that are drawn to darkness and there are parts of him that are drawn to light. So he's in a place that's extremely confusing for a young male because he doesn't have, or he chose not to have, out of fear. So let's just, do the speculation thing. Had Adam stayed with the Baptistes, had he allowed their family, JP and Kenji in particular, to guide him over the coming, say, 3 to 5 years from when he was 13, he would have been a very different male because they would have helped discern for him what was dark and what was light, what was good and what was bad, because Adam is young enough, and I think it doesn't even have to be youth. I think we can all get confused this way. Sometimes things that sound right are actually wrong, and sometimes things that we are told by those around us or we kind of assume or take implication from other people is a bad thing is actually good. It's just hard, right? So that was the battle that Adam was fighting. Oh shoot, I'm getting pings and I don't know where they're from. I'm just gonna check something real quick on my computer because we've only got 15 minutes left. I'm looking for where is that dinging? Are you guys? Can somebody tell me in the comments? Are you hearing the dinging on my computer, or am I the only one hearing that? Because if you're not hearing, it's not a big deal. Where's the book found, Mary? You can find it on Dream, the Dream platform. Um, mm, Sorry, I'm just looking for your questions. Oh yeah, so I did the sterilization one. Um, if JP and Lark will name the new pack Adam's pack he is building now, it's hard not to see him as alpha. Adam is the alpha of his pack that he is building. He did not choose to be. He was he was kind of forced into it because of what people believe about him. They submitted to him. They literally showed up and submitted to him, and he did not want them to. And initially, when he was very young, he was trying to stop people from doing that. I wish that I could show. I mean, it would be pointless because it would be a lot of words for very little gain. But in my mind, I see this whole transition from when he's like 13 to when he's like 17 or 18, where he kind of gives up at some point and just accepts that people are going to continue to push him into leadership. He would have learned the hard way 2 or 3 times by not taking responsibility when people were following him because he doesn't want them to follow him. People would have gotten hurt, different things would have happened, and at some point he just accepts that he has to lead because people are following whether he wants them to or not. Um, so yes, he is absolutely the alpha of his pack, and he is actually the right person to be the alpha of his pack. He just doesn't want to be. Um, what are the voices that he hears? I'm assuming, Nikki, that you're asking about Adam. So it's a combination of things. Like, I do believe that there's a supernatural aspect to our world, and I do believe that we can be influenced by things. I don't believe, I'm not trying to say that every time you hear a voice in your head that you're, um, that it's psychosis or whatever. What I think happens is we get drawn to things. Some of them are good and some of them are bad. Some of them are true and some of them are deceptive. And when we are just living our lives, we hear, and I use the quotation marks, like, usually when we have influential people in our lives, good or bad, toxic or healthy, people will talk about hearing the voice of a person who would send a certain message consistently. So for somebody who's had, for example, a very unhealthy parent, when they hit certain triggers in their lives, they'll hear, quote unquote, that parent and what that parent would have said about whatever the problem is. So on the one hand, you've got Adam having those kinds of influences. He's got the messed up messages from his dad and his older brothers. He's got the positive messages from Lark and JP and the Baptistes, and they fight. You know, they're conflicting. But on the other hand, on a supernatural level, he has very powerful forces at work in the world around him who want to influence him, both good from God and the light and power that he's supposed to have, and bad from the demonic side and the power that's being played with to try and increase the demonic power in the world. So both of those forces are also at work on him. And some of that is quite tangible to him. Some of it is what we would call psychological or emotional. Other is supernatural, where there are influences, powers at work trying to draw him in one direction or another. So the voices are a real combination for him. Um, oh, I'm sorry you have to miss Demon Slayer, Nikki, but good news. It will be up on my YouTube channel, and I will post the different pieces so that you can just listen to the part that you want to. Um, everybody, everybody's asking about the Demon Alpha and the White Wolf. This came up in the questions as well, and I see there's some discussion of it. I'm not going to tell you who is who and what is what, but I will tell you that Alpha Sather was not the Demon Alpha. Everyone thought he was from day one. I hope that I will never be that predictable, but it's possible. I won't say I didn't toy with the idea. I did. But I needed him to be an obvious villain. I wanted the Demon Alpha to be much more ambiguous. So I wanted you to end this with questions about that. And I'm glad that you have. I know it's frustrating for you, but honestly, I've done the job that I set out to do, which is to leave question marks over several people. Um, let's see. Did a demon attack Lark to kill her or JP? Yes. So every time a demon attacks, whether they're capable of it or not, their goal is to kill. Every time. The question is whether they can, and also, obviously, depending on who they are fighting, whether that person has the ability to stop them. That was why JP wanted to train Lark. That was why he couldn't believe that her dad had not trained her, because he knew these things don't play games. Like, if they show up, they want you dead, and if they can't get you dead, they want you hurt. Um, so, yeah, they were absolutely, if that thing had been able to, it would have killed her or JP or anybody, frankly, who was good. The only people or wolves that the demons don't want to kill is those that are working with them. And even then, it's iffy. um, okay, no dinging. Good. Um, oh yes, so there's a couple people asking about Demon Slayer, which we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. That book is on Nova. So if you are an Android user, the app is called Nova, but it shows up in a search for Google Play. It says like Nova, good novel, web novel. It has like three different things, but the first one is Nova. If you're searching on an Apple device, it's called Nova Fiction. Excuse me. Oh, and Mary says she read it on Fantasia. It was on Fantasia. I don't know if it still is. That's a third party app, and it turned out that they took all my money. But yeah, that was the only way that Apple users could read it until like 3 weeks ago, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago. It wasn't, you couldn't get it any other way on the Apple phones before. Um, who is the demon? Alpha? I'm not going to tell you because I still want. No, and I'm not going to give you three guesses. Um, the whole. I know that it's frustrating and I don't like frustrating you. I will tell you this. If we get a few months down the line and I know that we're not going to get to tell Adam's story, at least not tell it at length, then I'll tell you the story so that you know all the resolutions to all the different things. Um, but right now, all the questions you guys are asking are exactly the questions that I wanted you to ask. Um, so I really hope that what I can do is show you Adam's story with JP and Lark involved in that. And you can see the whole thing come together and discover who the demon elf is, who the white wolf is, all of that. I hope that we can discover it together. How is Thomas as an uncle? So here's the thing. I have a lot of time for Thomas. Um, I also have a lot of things that I would like to slap Thomas about. Thomas is an uncle on a practical, pragmatic level is a wonderful male because he just like is not drawn by his emotions at all. Like every decision that he makes is like for him everything is very black and white. This is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad. If JP talks a lot at the beginning about how tunnel visioned he is when he gets an idea in his head or a goal. It's because he believes that's a good thing to do, and he will pursue that to the ends of the earth or his own death. Like he just doesn't swerve. Unless in that process he learns something that changes the goal. So, as an uncle, he's a guy you want to have on your side because very intelligent, extremely driven. If there's a job to do, he'll do it. You can give him anything and he's gonna get it done. But also not sensitive in the least. Like, this is a guy who, when he sees something and it believes it's true, he'll just tell you. And he can't understand why you would get so upset about it. You see that when he talks to JP and Lark when she's upset, and he's just like, "Well, here's how you have to deal with it." And they're talking about Adam, how you should handle this young man who is rebelling and struggling and everything, and he's just like, you got to stop. He's just like, boom, done. And Lark in that conversation observes that she knows what he's saying is true, but it's abrasive in the way that he communicates it, and that's the big problem with Thomas. You can trust At the very least, you can trust that he believes what he's telling you is true. He's not a liar. But at the same time, if he believed there was a good reason to hide something from you, he would do it with not an ounce of conscience. Do you understand what I mean? Like, to him, everything is right or wrong, and he will not, like, almost impossible to change his mind. It would take tangible physical truth to change his mind. You would have to give him evidence for him to shift on something. And the problem is because he pursues things so single-mindedly and so academically, usually he knows more about stuff than the people that he's talking to. And the stuff that other people want to talk to him about, he just doesn't care. So he's just not even going to engage. It's not that no one has ever tried to talk to Thomas about how he communicates. He's very aware of the effect that he has on people. He doesn't care. So he's not going to put a lot of effort in. He's learned over the years that there are times and places where it's worth trying to persuade people a little bit. So every so often he'll step into something a little more softly, but it's purely out of his own drive to like get things done, right? Or get people on board. He just feelings are not a driver for him. And there was a conversation in my Discord not too long ago that I loved where we were talking about Thomas's story. Does Thomas get a mate? And I was like, yeah. And I wish that I could tell that story. That would be the most entertaining um, love story to tell because for Thomas, emotions are just something to like deal with. They are not a driver or a motivator or anything. So to suddenly find himself in a position where his emotions are at war with his goals or his, need to do would just absolutely throw him for a complete loop. To have a person whose feelings matter to him would be a new experience. So it's not to say he loves his family, right? He has emotions. It's not that he doesn't have emotions. It's that he finds them irritating. So JP has learned how to kind of communicate with him and how to just accept that he is the way he is. And so they have actually a very good and productive relationship most of the time. But they get on each other's nerves, just like brothers. But JP trusts him, really trusts him, and he really trusts JP. But they both have this area in their lives where they're like, I just would not take that to him because they know that their goals are different. And so they know what's the right thing to take to each other and what's the thing that they just deal with on their own. And what I would love to be able to show you, or what I imagine would be a lot of fun to read or write, would be Thomas's sudden need to try to understand how to show a person emotionally that you care about them because his love languages are so like stark and so like not related to emotion that he would be doing it all wrong. Like he would be showing all the things that he's saying and doing all the things that to him would mean love, and his mate would be like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And I could just see him being stuck in this place where he has to go to JP and be like, "How do you be like affectionate?" You know what I mean? Like he just doesn't know. He doesn't know how to make a person feel something because for him it's all about the question, the puzzle, the solution, right? All about the solution. So for me, it would be a super fun to tell that story just because of the type of character that he is. It would be a lot of fun. But honestly, yes, he is still the weird uncle. He's always going to be the weird uncle. He's never going to be the guy that you're like, oh, my Thomas, I love him. He's always going to be half funny and half scary. Always. That's just who he is. Janelle said he's so smart, he's stupid. Yes, very definitely. And Melissa said, Thomas did grow on me, but I'm still a little leery about him at times. You should be, because the reality is when somebody's wired that way, if they come to believe that something is the right thing to do, they will, I mean, you just won't even factor into the decision making, right? You have to be careful with people like that because it's not that they have this malicious intent to go out and destroy you, but they might do it by accident. Or they might figure that they think that destroying you is the right thing to do, and then they're going to do it wholeheartedly. Like, um, I want to give you Adam's story, Cervanthi, and I really hope that I get to. It's like Sheldon on Big Bang. Yes, there's a lot, coitus. There's a lot. He was definitely that character because I love that character. There was definitely an element of him that for me came into Thomas, but Thomas is a lot more savvy. Thomas is a lot more manipulative in the sense that he has learned what gains the response that he needs, and to him that's just a tool. Like he doesn't see it as manipulation. He's like, well, if you're here and you need to get here, and in order to do that you need this person to believe this, then that's what you tell them, or that's what you do. Like he just that's just the way it is. So he's a lot more I don't want to say darker than Sheldon. It's more that he's more street smart and definitely with the ladies. I mean, so imagine a guy who's as a teenager goes, well, okay, if I want to have a fun sex life, then I need to learn how to make the females enjoy it, right? So that's his goal. That becomes his goal. He spends 2 or 3 years working on it like a puzzle. He's not embarrassed to ask questions. He's not at all like self-conscious. He's absolutely like, okay, teach me, because he wants to know. So he spends some of his teen years being taught by females how to make females feel pleasure. Now he's a male, an adult male, who can go out and do whatever he wants because he knows how to bring a female with him, so to speak. There's fun aspects to Thomas's character. Um, anyway, yes, I agree with you. Very much like Sheldon. Okay. I'm realizing that we are getting over time, so I'm going to do this really quick. Favorite part of the book? Definitely JP and his family, and the interaction between JP and George and Jordan and Thomas, and just that whole male bonding thing again. I love that. It's just a lot of fun for me. Favorite character in the book? Hands down, JP. I had some people who said to me he reminded them of Reth, but like with a little more angst. He does that for me too. Not quite the same. It doesn't have the same feel to it, but he's definitely that alpha whose heart is in the right place and whose strength. I guess to me that's the difference between JP and Reth. Reth knows his own strengths. JP doesn't always. He doesn't always realize how strong he is. Um, and is there anything you would change in the book? I would just get to tell the whole story. And I would have been able, so originally I was going to be able to show you much more of the gathering and much more of the development of Lark between training and success. There was going to be more steps to that process. I wish I'd been able to show you more of that.